Now, this is very fascinating too. We're going to look at a slide in a little bit that talks about the teachings of the inverted tree. Now, in some of the Mayan traditions too, there's this idea that when we look up at the night sky, the stars are the roots. And we're connecting to the root system of the cosmic tree. And for some reason, I see a relationship with the inverted tree in this way. Now, in this context, they refer to the inverted tree as the journey of the soul, the descent of the soul coming from the Godhead into this plane of existence. And like the movement of sap in an inverted tree, the souls move downward from the source. So here we find a directional process of a soul's journey. The descent is through the trunk and the branches, twigs, leaves, flowers, and then more. And then the soul comes into this plane of existence. And in this way, as the souls descend and they come into materialization, it's also the opposite direction is where the souls ascend to dissolve and return back to the infinite. And so there's this relationship of descent and ascent, descent into materialization, into form, ascent into the infinite. Now, in various yogic texts, they describe this inverted tree as a tree that grows upside down. In the Katha Upanishad, it talks about this tree being the one that reveals the secrets of death. And in that way, its roots above and its branches below teach us about the path of descent and ascent of a soul's journey. Also, there's a lot about the process of awareness and awareness in consciousness related to the tree. Sometimes the banyan trees and their root systems for sure, and then their branches are like the web of consciousness. And so when we sit at the banyan tree, we're tapping into the web of relationships and the interconnectedness of all phenomena. And part of that is the process of dissolving or releasing or dropping the thoughts, or letting the thoughts pass by like shooting stars or comets. And then as a thought arrives, let it go. As a thought arrives, we let it go. And in that way, we open up these fields of communion with the sacred. And this tree is very much revered to as that. It's a teaching around letting go of thoughts, desires, and expectations and finding communion with the infinite. You know, attachment, but awareness of interdependence. Mm-hmm. Now, here we see this picture of the upside down hanging world tree. And I highly recommend when you have some time looking at this. But the thing I wanted to kind of highlight is right here, you know, when we're talking about creator, preserver, destroyer, we see Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma on these branches, and these leaves indicating the world. And earlier we talked about the upside down tree and how souls descend. We see up here the god Kabir or Nabram up here, and then this descent through the trunk. And then in that way, the destroyer, the preserver, and the creator in the branches, and then this expression, the leaves being all of us. Now it mentions that in the Bhagavad Gita, in this context, that this was a resting place for Lord Krishna, and the roots were upward, the branches down, and that the hymns of the Vedas were the hymns of the leaves. The teachings of the leaves carried the hymns. There's a relationship there. Sometimes you see in some of these older traditions, teachings of the cosmos either written on paper or written on papyrus, or even some of the shavings of the tree, and even on leaves. Like sometimes teachings are passed that way. And this one in this context would be the teaching of the Vedic hymns. Also, again, we see the reflection of the spiritual realm and the material realm. They are the same, as that which is above is that which is below. When the two become one, then we enter the kingdom, we enter the field of enlightenment. And so part of the teaching of this tree is how above and below come into our hearts, you know, because we are the axis mundi for the above and below. And then when those two come together, we enter the kingdom, the field of enlightenment. This tree of life, again, is the teacher of all of existence, infinite consciousness. And in that way, when we commune with something that is materialized, that carries all of the teachings of the infinite, you know, because sometimes it's very abstract. Like, what does it mean to connect with the infinite? Like, what does it mean to connect with all of existence or immortality. And the way that they did this in the old ways was through the medicine and teachings of the trees. So there was a materialized carrier of the teachings of infinity. This is referencing a festival that happens in northern India, in Goa and Gujarat, for 3 days in a particular month in the Hindu calendar. Married women fast and tie threads around this banyan tree. And during this festival, they offer their prayers for health and prosperity. And this is another interesting shared process that we see in North America too, with sun dancing, where there's this relation, these umbilical cords or celestial cords of the human with the tree. And in this way, the teachings of health, prosperity, life-giving nature, and fertility are directly connected. And we saw this too in some of the Celtic festivals too. The maple, dancing in relationship and around the tree. I've talked about this before in our first session, so I didn't want to talk about it too much now, but our tree, the new tree, is our sacred trees in the jungle. And we call them the homes of the Tautomonas, which are the spirits, the guardians. And they live inside these trees. And the duendes, the little people, live in these forests of the banyan. The way I was raised is they are our grandparents, these banyan trees. They're living ancestors. And similar to in my culture, when we, go to a home or we go to a festival or village, the first ones we acknowledge and offer our respects to are the elders, the grandparents of the family, of the community. Maybe we don't know everybody's name because there's all the villages and there's just so many people, but we know that we need to go to acknowledge the elders first, the grandparents. And then from there, we successively acknowledge the adults and then all the generations to the youngest. And this was also something that we'd have to do with these trees. Like a lot of times when you would go into the forest, you had to ask permission. And you had to ask permission to them as grandparents. And that was a way to show the respect. And the part of the teaching there is learning how to listen to the response. And the different grandparent trees would communicate the response different to the person, learning about how to listen. I feel like this really is beautifully related to the Bodhi tree, of where, you all allow all the thoughts to come and pass, where there's this kind of like emptiness that occurs, to then be able to listen and pay attention to what is being communicated from the tree. These are called new trees for us. And the Tatotanos are the people of the land. And then the Tatomonas are the ancestors. So people of the land that then become the ancestors of the trees. So when we commune with these trees, we're talking to our ancestors specifically. And these were like really important dwelling places also for the little people and also little children that are ancestor spirits. We also have these megalithic stones called laddie stones, and they were places that also the spirits lived. And so they were like our stone people and the tree people, our living ancestors, a little bit of where I come from. Here's a tree from Guam. To this day, it's part of how we honor the spirit, is through honoring these trees. And here we see this example again of all of these branches. I love this expression where this particular tree, all of the different paths come together. They emerge out of it and they come back to it. So it's almost like a grand meeting place for all cultures and traditions.